Anyway, you're supposed to do it so that you can see their
Wow, you know what? I was sitting there holding a pose and it said you're live. That was weird. That was weird. It was like I was already live and I was still holding the pose. And I'm going, when is this gonna? Oh, howdy everybody. Howdy. I'm bringing our Facebook Live family on. Our Facebook Live family, bringing them on today, right now. So bear with me a second because we're having some issues there, but we're gonna get them resolved, and then everything will be fine. Although there are some connectivity issues today, I'm going to tell you that right now. We've actually had to switch back and forth between our regular internet provider and our emergency provider several times since about 10 o'clock last night, and I don't know why. Yeah, and we're a little slow right here on Facebook Live, but we're going to get it done. We're going to get it. Here we go. We're going to start the live video. It's starting live video. That's what it says. I don't feel like I can officially start till I've got all three of you in. We want to be fair to everyone. Yet we're still waiting. There we go. And now I'll officially start the show. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, moms and dads, children of all ages, mothers and brothers, fathers and uncles, sisters and aunts, moms and mistresses. Welcome to Living on a Thin Line with Tony Vicich. We come to you every day at 2 p.m. Arizona time. We are your daily distraction from all the anger, anxiety, and hoopla. Man, I usually got that down. It comes out smooth. In the world today. The show is on 3 platforms, and those platforms are Comedy Schools, RadioNetwork.com, YouTube Comedy Schools, and Facebook Live. Those are 3 platforms. The show is built around 3 things normally, and those 3 things are your questions and comments right here on Facebook Live or on the other 2 aforementioned social media sites. It's there, and also we build it around. Usually, I have some knickknack, some little piece of hoopla, some sort of falderall that I show you. We try to weave a story around it, and I recommend normally 2 artists or 2 pieces of music of our vast album vinyl collection. But we have begun to move somewhat more regularly now into the CD era, compact disc era. We have several hundred compact discs, and since we don't play the music because we don't have a music license or licenses, and they will take down your video if you do that. We just kind of talk about the music and how cool it is. And I might be sticking a little bit today. I'm not quite too sure. Because like I said, we've got some strange internet connections going on. So what do I want to tell you about today? You know, we talked about John Wayne not too long ago. We talked about John Wayne movies, and how John Wayne is a controversial figure and always will be because he was a Republican, not because he's Republican. He was a hard right-wing guy. He was a virulent anti-communist. He was an uber patriot, although he did not serve in World War II. Many people who were later on vilified for their political beliefs, people like Dalton Trumbo, people who actually served in the in World War II, found their careers destroyed during the anti-communist hysteria of the 50s. But we talked about John Wayne a little bit. We've been talking about some country music, Bob Wills, Bill Monroe. Who else did we talk about? Hank Williams, of course. So we've talked about Merle Haggard. So we've talked about country music quite a bit, and we've talked about John Wayne, but I want to talk a minute about Western movies. So I want to talk about Western movies just a little bit. So someone once said that every civilization has a way of telling its story. Every civilization has a way of telling its story. This was a number of years back. And they said England has Shakespeare. And Shakespeare is how the English tell their stories. Through the words that he wrote and their constant interpretation of those words and the way that they produce the shows, etc. For instance, I don't know if you know, when Shakespeare was alive, no women were allowed into theater, and men played all the women's parts, and no one thought any different of that. England had Shakespeare and America had the Western. The Western was the American story, the story of immigrants coming from Europe to the New World and then moving west across it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and debate all the merits of whether any immigrants should have come across from Europe at all. I'm not going to debate that. That's not where my interest lies today. I'm not going to debate whether everything that was done as they crossed the ocean, the mountains and rivers and plains and prairies was right or good. But the Western tells the story of the United States. The Western helps shape through those stories who we are and how we handle conflict and how we handle pain and how we handle loss and how we handle victory. That's what the Western did. Now the Western fell out of fashion sometime in the by the early 70s. It'd fallen out of fashion. There, of course, was retro Westerns, guys like Sam Peckinpah, etc., who I loved making Westerns. But the Western kind of died out. Oddly enough, there was a big Western in the 1970s, although it was disguised. A man walked into a studio mogul's office in Los Angeles, and they went, "All right, tell us your movie." And he goes, "It's a Western." And everybody rolled their eyes and, "Oh." He goes, "In outer space." They went, "Oh." They said, "Well, what are you going to call it?" He says, "Oh, I'd like to call it Star Wars." And they said, "Very good, George." That's somewhat of a paraphrasing of what happened, but that's kind of what happened. Star Wars is the American Western told in outer space. The storylines, the themes, the way people interact with one another, the archetypes, all come from Western stories. Stories of the West. Where men used to ride horses, they then rode spaceships. And when I was growing up, I grew up on Westerns. I grew up on cowboy movies, some of which I didn't even want to watch after a while. I go, I don't even want to watch this movie. But it was always on. There was always a Western on. There were only 3 networks at the time, and all 3 of them had Westerns. Every night, there were at least 2 Westerns on. Bonanza, Gunsmoke, Big Valley, Death Valley Days, on and on and on and on and on. Have Gun Will Travel, Rawhide, Wagon Train, Westerns. Some told just from one town. Gunsmoke told from one town. Dodge City, a fictional Dodge City. Wagon Train, story of going from east to west, families, farmers, new immigrants, and the challenges that they face. We got some sort of we got a little noise issue here, but we're going to deal with it in just a second. Westerns all the time. So we got sick of Westerns. Westerns have made somewhat of a comeback, but they're not the dominant theme anymore. But I'll tell you what, there were lessons that you learned watching those Westerns. There were certain themes that rang true in those Westerns, in those stories, in those American stories, in those stories of the formation of the United States of America. There were stories. Now, whether you like Westerns or not, whether you think that they were horrible propaganda, whether you think they were a myth, whether you think they were fiction, and a lot of them were, there were some eternal truths that were told in Westerns. And one recurring theme in almost all Westerns was that you never shot a man in the back. You never shot a man in the back. And as a matter of fact, anybody who actually shot a man in the back was not looked upon favorably, and I'm being kind about the words they use, in the Western movies and television shows and books that so dominated 20th century America for the first 60 or 70 years. Consistently throughout those stories of conflict and endurance and survival and success, anyone who shot anyone in the back was considered a coward. So for a lot of us growing up in the 50s and 60s, and for some of you in the 40s, and maybe some of you growing up in the 70s, okay, who grew up on this, those ideas are implanted in our mind because it was on so often and it rang so true and it made so much sense that you didn't shoot another man in the back. And until we return to some of the themes and ideas and ways of living that were presented to us in those Western movies, a lot of the Western movies were nothing more than a retelling of the Knight's Tales. And the main theme of the Knight's Tales were men doing good for goodness sake, even if it affected them in a negative way. As a matter of fact, the great detective stories of the 20th century, written by men like Dashiell Hammett, whose career was destroyed by right-wing kooks of that time. And Raymond Chandler. I believe it was Raymond Chandler who in an interview one time said they're just all the retelling of King Arthur's Round Table and the Knights and Tales and Knights. Men who do right for right. And I see what you've just posted, Daniel Bros. We need Hollywood to tell us morals. Well, if not them, who? And where are you learning yours? And where did your values come from? And why do you believe what you believe? And I'm not telling you that Hollywood should tell you your morals. I'm just telling you that in the tales of the Old West, the fictionalized, sanitized versions of the tales of the Old West, one of the most honorable things they talked about were fair fights, decency, manners, and you never shot another man in the back. There was no excuse for shooting another man in the back. And somehow, some way, somewhere, that seems to have gotten lost. Maybe it never really was there. Maybe it was only in the movies. Maybe we've been shooting people in the back our entire history. But what we learned was that you fought fair and you didn't shoot another man in the back no matter what. Okay. All right. Let's do this. A couple things moving forward. All right. A couple things moving forward. Tonight at 6 p.m. Arizona time, I'll be giving a free intro to my stand-up comedy workshops. This is absolutely free. It's about 50 minutes. About 50 minutes of absolutely free, of an absolutely free workshop where we lay out for you somewhat of the structure, somewhat of the structure. Is it messing up a little bit, Champ de Blasio? The storm is really screwing you up the program today for me to catch you later. All right, well, I apologize about that, Champ. I can't apologize for the storm. Tonight at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we are doing a free intro of our stand-up comedy workshops. You can catch it by going to comedyschools.com and clicking the link there, or I will have a link put up right above the show on my page, Tony Vicich, Vicich, right after we go off. So if you know someone who might be interested, then that might be cool. Laura Mahler says it's fine there. Okay. I don't know if anybody else is having any sort of trouble, but thank you very much. So anyway, we're doing that tonight at 6. You know what I found might be fun today is I found a couple of CDs here that I wanted to talk about. There was a young man on Facebook last night who then was going to deconstruct Hey 19 by Steely Dan and said the 70s must have been really screwed up because here's a story of an older guy going to bed with a girl who is barely legal. So I don't know what barely means. I remember as a bartender, if someone was going to turn 21 on Tuesday and it was Monday, they were illegal and I couldn't serve them. But if it was Tuesday or Wednesday, okay, then I could serve them, and they weren't barely legal; they were legal. But not so much deconstructed. But you know what? Hey 19 is not really about that. But I found this CD from the 40s and the 50s that I think is fun. It's called Risque Rhythms. Risque Rhythms. As you can see there, someone is dancing, and they've actually thrown the woman all the way up in the air, and they're looking up her skirt. So Risque Rhythms. And these were fun songs that basically come from the big band era and the jazz and jump blues era. The first one, of course, was by Moose Jackson with the Tiny Bradshaw Orchestra, and it was the big 10-inch record. So some of you know that from Aerosmith redoing it, where it's one of those songs where they think you're leading it into all she wants is my big 10-inch record, Dad, please, on the radio. So it was one of those things that led you to believe that he was actually talking about his penis, but he was talking about a record. It was fun. Big Long Slidin' by Dinah Washington, Laundromat Blues, Walkin' Blues, Walkin' Right. Wasn't that good? It Ain't the Meat, It's the Motion. 60-Minute Man, which was a song by the Dominoes. It was about someone who can actually have sex for an entire hour. Keep on Churning, Silent George, Long John Blues, Mountain Oysters, My Man Stands Out, Rocket 69, and I Love to Play Your Piano, Let Me Bang on Your Box by the Toppers and their orchestra. So these were not normally played on the radio. They were not played on the radio at all. They were records that were played someplace else. Okay, they were records that were played someplace else. Records that were played at home, or records that were played in clubs, or songs that bands played in clubs later on at night. Okay, and they were rather risque. And I suppose that another generation could look back and went, wow, that's some pretty sexist stuff. But maybe it's time we started figuring out the difference between sexual and sexist. Maybe it's time we started figuring that out. So I understand the young man talking about Hey 19. I get that. Okay, but then they're listening to songs by Cardi B called WAP, which, and WAP is an acronym for wet ass pussy. So while we might have to now, 40 years later, explain the thinking of those of us who were young in the 70s when we would listen to a song like Hey 19 and not blanch at the concept, this generation, 30, 40 years from now, will have to explain to their children and grandchildren why they were listening to WAP. Just like we were surprised that our grandparents and parents might have been listening to the big 10-inch record, or I Love to Play Your Piano, Let Me Bang Your Box. The young are so very moral, for they have not yet had their morals tested. Speaking of a time and a place, this is a cool CD too. This is, you can't read it because it's backwards, because it does that. Volume 2 is A Year in the Life, 1973. Why did I pull this out? Because that's the year that I graduated from high school. By the way, I graduated high school, I was 17. You know how tough that was in 1973? And I'll tell you why. Because they had just made it legal for 18-year-olds to vote in 1972. Okay, a lot of my friends turned 18 in 1972. All right, I didn't turn 18 till August of 1973. Didn't get to vote. It was legal to drink in the state of Colorado at the age of 18, a place that I hitchhiked to and hung out on the streets for a number of weeks, and had a time that might make some young people blanch right now at the adventures that I had. But in 1973, I graduated high school at the age of 17. 2 days after I graduated, I stuck my thumb out and took off hitchhiking across the country. That summer, I slept on people's floors, or would sneak into my girlfriend's basement bedroom at night while her parents were asleep and stay there with her, and eventually got my own apartment and have been on my own ever since. But I started out young, and I started out hard, and I started out wild, and I started out mean. And these were the hit songs. These were the hit songs that I was listening to at the time. Or that I wasn't listening to, but they were hits. Jim Croce's Bad Bad Leroy Brown, Steeler Wheels, Stuck in the Middle with You, Three Dog Night, Shambhala, Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show, Cover Rolling Stone, Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Midnight Train to Georgia, Dobie Gray, Drift Away, The Stories, Brother Louie, Billy Preston, Will It Go Around in Circles, and Maureen McGovern, The Morning After. And let me tell you, there's certain songs on here that I couldn't stand. They'd play them on the radio and go, ugh, was not my cup of tea. The Morning After by Maureen McGovern was not my cup of tea. I thought Brother Louie was just one of the most terrible songs I ever heard on the radio. Okay? I loved Drift Away. I wasn't a big Gladys Knight fan, much more of a Mavis Staples fan. Liked Marvin Gaye, but I wasn't a big Motown guy when I was 17. Got a big kick out of Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show, Cover the Rolling Stones, written by legendary Shel Silverstein, at one time a cartoonist for Playboy magazine, then a lyricist who wrote Cover to Rolling Stone for Dr. Hook and A Boy Named Sue for Johnny Cash, and later on ended his life writing very successful children's books. I don't know if you want to measure him by one thing. And by measuring one thing, does it discount the other? Three Dog Night Shambhala was a cool song. Steeler Wheel Stuck in the Middle was one of the great party records of my high school years. And Jim Croce, everybody loved him, although I thought Bad Bad Leroy Brown was not one of his better songs, was played nonstop. Here's the thing. When I listen to any of those songs now, if they accidentally pop up, if I put this CD on, which I haven't in a number of years, and I hear Brother Louie, what I didn't like, or Maureen McGovern's The Morning After, it makes me nostalgic for that time. Even though I didn't like the songs, it makes me nostalgic for a time. And what I remember is all the good things. Thank goodness. There's two types of nostalgia, where you remember only the good things, or you only remember the bad things. Now, I actually am aware of both. But most of my nostalgia is for the good things. And remember even the good in the people who I thought bad of at the time. Go, you know what? No, you know what? Come to think about it. So when I look into the past, I understand people and their motivations more, as opposed to looking in the past and wanting to upbraid them for them. Nostalgia, one of the dangers of nostalgia, does make you forget all the terrible things. I remember my grandparents one time talking about the 40s and going, oh, it was a great time. I go, wasn't there a big world war going on? They go, yeah, but we all got together in the yard and we sang and we all had jobs. They go, wasn't a bunch of people being shot? And they go, yeah, that's true. But you know what? Glenn Miller. So maybe I have a little of that now for the 1970s. Maybe it was a horrible time and maybe we were horrible people. But that's not the way I remember it. And that's not the way I see it. And that's not the story that I will tell. Okay. That's enough of that for today. Okay. I saw something in the news this morning. I wanted to comment on it. By the way, if you ever go, all right, ever like cowboy movies, I might want to watch them. Start out with John Ford. Anything directed by the legendary director John Ford. Yes, some of them have John Wayne in them. But remember, you're watching a John Ford movie. Just a little something between you and I can tell you something. From everything I read, John Ford didn't think much of John Wayne either. But he knew that people were going to go see those movies and hear those stories. Okay, you can start out with anything from the John Ford trilogy. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, Ford Apache. Or you can go to the movie that he made where he kind of deconstructed all the myths that he helped create by creating Western movies. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And then you have watched a damn good movie. And that's it for the day. We're going to go. Thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. on Living on a Thin Line. Thank you very much. Goodbye.